Imagine being 5 years old, playing in a beautiful garden with your siblings. Your father comes home from work, lifts you onto his shoulders, tells you bedtime stories. He's your hero. You love him unconditionally, the way all children love their parents. Now imagine discovering, years later, that your father orchestrated the murder of millions, that the work he came home from was organizing genocide, that his hands, the ones that held you, signed execution orders, that the man you loved was one of history's greatest monsters. This was the reality for the children of Nazi leaders. They were born into privilege and power, raised in luxury while the world burned around them. Some lived in villas next to concentration camps, their childhood playgrounds within sight of crematorium smoke. Others grew up in Berlin's government quarter, surrounded by the architects of the Holocaust. Then came 1945. Their world collapsed. Fathers were executed, imprisoned, or fled. Families were scattered. Names that once commanded respect became marks of shame. And these children, teenagers, some still in elementary school, had to confront an impossible question. How do you reconcile loving a parent with the horror of what they did? Some spent their lives in denial, defending their fathers to their dying day. Others publicly denounced their parents, turning family legacy into lifelong activism. Many simply disappeared, changing names and identities, trying to escape a past they could never truly leave behind. This is the story of the lost generation, the children of Göring, Himmler, Hess, Frank, Mengele, and other Nazi leaders. It's about inherited guilt, impossible loyalties, and the question that haunts them all: are you responsible for your father's sins? These aren't abstract historical figures. These people are alive today, or lived into the 21st century. They're teachers, nurses, architects, ordinary people carrying extraordinary burdens. And their stories reveal something profound about identity, morality, and the long shadow of evil. Etta Göring was born on June 2nd, 1938, the only child of Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, Hitler's designated successor, and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Her birth was a Nazi propaganda event. Hitler himself became her godfather. Her christening was attended by the entire Nazi elite. She was, in a very real sense, the princess of the Third Reich. Etta's early childhood was one of unimaginable luxury. She grew up in Karenhall, her father's vast hunting estate north of Berlin, a palace filled with looted artwork, staffed by dozens of servants. Hermann Göring was one of the primary architects of art looting across Europe, and his private collection rivaled major museums. To young Etta, her father was simply Papa, a jovial, larger-than-life figure who showered her with affection and gifts. He was known to interrupt important meetings to play with his daughter. Nazi officials who came for conferences would find Göring on the floor, playing tea party with Etta. But this fairy tale existence had a dark foundation that Etta couldn't yet comprehend. Her father was directly responsible for countless atrocities: the establishment of the Gestapo, the creation of concentration camps, the plundering of occupied territories, and complicity in the Holocaust. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Etta was just 6 years old. Her father was captured by American forces and put on trial at Nuremberg. Throughout the trial, Hermann Göring maintained a defiant attitude, showing no remorse for his actions. Etta and her mother were allowed to visit him in prison. These visits would haunt Etta for the rest of her life. Her father, once surrounded by power and luxury, was now a prisoner awaiting judgment. But to Etta, he was still Papa. On October 15, 1946, Hermann Göring was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. He was sentenced to death by hanging. Hours before his scheduled execution, He committed suicide by swallowing a cyanide capsule he'd somehow hidden from guards. Etta was 8 years old when her father died. She would spend the rest of her life defending him. Fond of denial. Unlike some children of Nazi leaders who eventually confronted their parents' crimes, Etta Göring never wavered in her loyalty. Throughout her life, she died in 2018 at age 80. She maintained that her father was innocent, that he was scapegoated, that history had judged him unfairly. In interviews, Etta would admit that mistakes were made during the Nazi era, but insisted her father personally committed no crimes. She claimed he didn't know about the Holocaust, or if he did, had no power to stop it. These claims contradicted overwhelming documentary evidence. Etta's denial wasn't simply about defending her father's reputation. It was about protecting her own identity. If Hermann Göring was the monster history portrayed, what did that make her? Could she still love him? Could those childhood memories of a doting father coexist with the reality of his crimes? For Etta, the answer was to reject the reality. She clung to the father she remembered, refusing to accept what he had done. The lawsuit for looted art. In 2015, at age 77, Etta made headlines when she attempted to reclaim artwork that had belonged to her father, specifically a painting that she claimed was rightfully hers as his heir. The request was shocking. Her father's art collection was almost entirely looted from occupied territories and Jewish families. Claiming inheritance rights to stolen art displayed a profound moral blindness. The case was rejected, but it revealed something disturbing. Even 70 years after the war, some children of Nazi leaders still felt entitled to the proceeds of their parents' crimes. The cost of denial. Psychologists who studied Etta's case noted that her rigid denial likely served a protective function. Acknowledging her father's crimes would have required her to reconstruct her entire childhood, to reinterpret every memory through a lens of horror. For some people, this cognitive dissonance is unbearable. It's psychologically easier to deny reality than to accept that the person you loved most in the world was a mass murderer. But this denial came at a cost. Etta lived her entire life isolated from historical truth, unable to process genuine grief, locked in a defensive crouch against a world that accurately judged her father. She never married, had no children, spent decades in legal battles trying to reclaim her father's property. Her entire adult life was consumed by defending a man who had been dead for over 70 years. When Etta Göring died in 2018, her obituaries noted that she had spent 8 decades in her father's shadow, unable or unwilling to step into the light of historical truth. Wolf Rudolf Hess was born November 18, 1937, the only child of Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy Führer and the third most powerful man in Nazi Germany, until his bizarre solo flight to Scotland in 1941. Wolf's relationship with his father was defined by absence and mystery. A father in prison, Rudolf Hess spent most of Wolf's life in prison. After his flight to Scotland, an apparently unauthorized attempt to negotiate peace with Britain, Hess was captured and held for the remainder of the war. At Nuremberg, he was convicted of crimes against peace and conspiracy and sentenced to life imprisonment in Spandau prison, Berlin. Wolf was just 8 years old when his father was sentenced. Rudolf Hess would spend the next 46 years in prison until his death in 1987 at age 93. For most of that time, he was Spandau's only prisoner. Wolf grew up visiting his father in prison, their relationship conducted through bars and supervised visits. He never knew his father as a free man. Every interaction was shaped by prison protocols, guard supervision, and the weight of his father's crimes. The conspiracy theories. Rudolf Hess's case was complicated by genuine mysteries. His flight to Scotland was never fully explained. His mental state during the Nuremberg trials was questionable. He claimed amnesia and displayed erratic behavior. and his death in 1987, officially ruled a suicide, has been contested by his family. Wolf Rüdiger Hess seized on these mysteries to construct an alternative narrative. His father was not a war criminal, but a martyr for peace. According to Wolf, Rudolf Hess had flown to Britain on a genuine peace mission, was unjustly imprisoned, and was possibly murdered to prevent his release. Wolf spent his adult life promoting these theories. He wrote books, gave interviews, attended neo-Nazi gatherings, and became a prominent figure in Holocaust denial circles. He argued that his father's trial was unjust, that he'd been scapegoated, that his imprisonment amounted to torture. The truth about Rudolf Hess, historical evidence, contradicts Wolf's narrative. Rudolf Hess was deeply complicit in Nazi crimes. He signed numerous anti-Jewish laws as deputy Führer. He was involved in early planning for territorial expansion. He participated in the regime's most important decisions from 1933–1941. His flight to Scotland wasn't a heroic peace mission. It was likely an unauthorized attempt to negotiate an alliance with Britain against the Soviet Union, maintaining Hitler's war aims while avoiding a two-front war. But Wolf couldn't accept this. Like Edda and Gudrun, he constructed a version of his father that allowed him to maintain love and respect. The cost of myth-making Wolf. Rüdiger Hess died in 2001 at age 63. He never acknowledged his father's crimes. His writings and speeches provided ammunition for neo-Nazi movements, who used Rudolf Hess as a martyr figure. The annual neo-Nazi marches in Wunsiedel, Germany, where Rudolf Hess was originally buried, became international embarrassments, attracting Holocaust deniers from across Europe. They marched under the banner of honoring Hess, but their real purpose was promoting Nazi ideology. Wolf's advocacy contributed directly to this. By mythologizing his father, he provided cover for ongoing Nazi sympathies. Not all children of Nazi leaders chose denial or advocacy. Some confronted their father's crimes head-on, often at tremendous personal cost. Nicholas Frank. The prosecutor. We covered Nicholas Frank earlier, but his case deserves deeper examination. As the son of Hans Frank, the butcher of Poland, Nicholas made the most radical choice possible. Public, vitriolic denunciation of his father. His book about his father is written as a direct address. You were a coward. You murdered millions and then claimed you were following orders. The hatred is raw, unfiltered, and has made Nicholas a controversial figure even among those who oppose Nazi ideology. Critics argue Nicholas's approach is performative, that his public displays of contempt serve his own psychological needs rather than historical justice. Supporters say his uncompromising stance is necessary, that any softness toward Nazi criminals, even from their children, enables revisionism. Nicholas has given hundreds of lectures, always carrying a photograph of his father's corpse after execution. This is what happens to mass murderers, he tells audiences. It's shocking, but that's his intention. Martin Adolf Bormann Jr. The priest. Martin Adolf Bormann Jr., born in 1930, was the oldest son of Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary, and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Unlike Nicholas Frank's hatred or Edda Göring's denial, Martin Bormann Jr. chose a different path, the Catholic priesthood. After the war, his father had died fleeing Berlin in 1945. Martin entered seminary. He became a priest, took vows of poverty, and spent his life doing missionary work in Africa. He changed his name, avoided publicity, and dedicated himself to serving the poor. Was this atonement? Escape? Genuine religious calling? Probably all three. Martin rarely spoke about his father, but when he did, he acknowledged the crimes and expressed shame. His choice to live in poverty and service stood in stark contrast to his father's pursuit of power and wealth. Martin Bormann Jr. died in 2013, having lived a quiet life far from his father's shadow. Katrin Himmler. Breaking the silence. Katrin Himmler, great-niece of Heinrich Himmler, represents a newer generation's approach to Nazi ancestry. Born in 1967, she never knew her infamous relative, but grew up in a family that maintained strict silence about him. In 2005, Katrin published a book examining her family's complicity in Nazi crimes. She didn't just condemn Heinrich, she investigated how her entire family enabled and benefited from the regime. This broke a family taboo and caused a rupture with relatives who preferred silence. Katrin also made a controversial personal choice. She married an Israeli man descended from Holocaust survivors. At their wedding, some family members refused to attend, but Katrin saw it as a form of healing, not erasing the past, but refusing to let it define the future. Rainer Höss, the commandant's grandson. Rainer Höss, grandson of Auschwitz, Commandant Rudolf Hess, discovered his family history as a teenager. The revelation devastated him, leading to years of depression and substance abuse. But eventually, Rainer chose to speak publicly about his grandfather's crimes. He works with Holocaust education organizations, visits schools, and tells his story, what it's like to discover you're descended from one of history's greatest murderers. "I can't change what my grandfather did," Rainer says in lectures, "but I can make sure people remember it, understand it, and learn from it." The children of Nazi leaders present unique case studies in psychology. They didn't commit crimes themselves, yet carry a burden unlike any other: the heritage of evil, the mechanisms of denial. Psychological research into Nazi leaders' children reveals several common defense mechanisms. Splitting, separating the loving father from the war criminal. Etta Göring could love her papa while denying his crimes because she mentally split these identities. Idealization, emphasizing positive traits while minimizing negative ones. Wolf Rudiger Hess idealized his father as a peace martyr, ignoring documentary evidence of his crimes. Projection, blaming external forces, the Allies, victors' justice, post-war propaganda, rather than accepting parental guilt. Identification. Some children identify so strongly with their parents that acknowledging parental evil would destroy their own identity. The burden of knowledge. Children who learned about their parents' crimes later in life often experienced it as trauma. The entire framework of their childhood had to be reinterpreted. That loving father who tucked you in at night. He signed execution orders during the day. Those family vacations, funded by stolen Jewish property. That beautiful home, built on the proceeds of genocide. This cognitive dissonance is almost unbearable. Some, like Nicholas Frank, channeled it into rage. Others, like Martin Bormann Jr., sought redemption through service. Still others, like Etta Göring, simply denied reality. Generational trauma research shows trauma can transmit across generations. Children of Nazi leaders often reported difficulty forming relationships, struggles with identity and self-worth, depression and anxiety, substance abuse issues, problems with authority and trust. Their children, the grandchildren of Nazi leaders, also report psychological impacts, though less severe. The trauma fades with generational distance, but echoes remain. The question of responsibility. Philosophers and ethicists have debated. What responsibility do these children bear? Legally, none. You can't be prosecuted for your parents' crimes. Morally, it's more complex. While children didn't choose their parents and aren't guilty of their crimes, some argue they have responsibilities to acknowledge historical truth, to not actively defend or deny crimes, to not profit from looted wealth, to contribute to historical education and reconciliation. Those who deny crimes or profit from stolen assets cross ethical lines. But those who simply try to live quiet lives carrying their burden privately, don't owe the world anything. The survivor perspective. Holocaust survivors and their descendants have varied views on Nazi leaders' children. Some appreciate children who publicly acknowledge their parents' crimes and work for education. They see value in descendants becoming allies in remembrance. Others are indifferent or hostile. Their position. Why should we care about the guilt feelings of perpetrators' families when our families were murdered? Many fall somewhere between. They don't need apologies from children, but they do need honesty. Denial, revisionism, and advocacy for Nazi criminals are unacceptable. Today, the children of Nazi leaders are mostly elderly or deceased, but their grandchildren and great-grandchildren continue wrestling with this legacy. The third and fourth generations. For younger generations, the relationship to Nazi ancestry is more abstract. They never knew their infamous relatives personally. The crimes are historical facts rather than family secrets. This distance allows for more objective assessment. Younger descendants tend to openly acknowledge family history, engage with Holocaust education, reject ideologies their ancestors held, view their ancestry as historical responsibility rather than personal guilt. But even third-generation descendants report feeling the weight of their names, the burden of explanation, the complexity of identity. Changed names and hidden identities. Many descendants have legally changed their names to escape association. The descendants of Mengele, Himmler, and other notorious figures often use different surnames. This creates its own problems. Living with a secret, always wondering if you should tell romantic partners or employers, feeling you're hiding something shameful even though you personally did nothing wrong. The ones who disappeared. Some children of Nazi leaders simply vanished from public record. They changed names, moved to other countries, created new identities. They chose complete separation from the past. Are they cowards for running? Or are they simply people trying to live normal lives under impossible circumstances? There's no easy answer. The ongoing debates, questions about Nazi leaders' children remain controversial. Should they inherit property? If that property was acquired through crime, do heirs have any legitimate claim? Should they speak publicly? Or does public speaking risk providing platforms for revisionism? What do they owe victims? Acknowledgement? Apology? Active restitution? Nothing? Can they ever truly escape? Or does the shadow of their ancestry follow them forever? The children of Nazi leaders were born into circumstances they didn't choose. They didn't commit the crimes that define their family names. Yet they carry burdens that most of us can barely imagine. Some spent their lives in denial, defending the indefensible, trapped in loyalty to monsters. Others chose public denunciation, turning family shame into educational mission. Many simply tried to live quiet lives, carrying their burden privately. There's no right way to be the child of a mass murderer. Each person made choices based on their psychology, their circumstances, their capacity to confront terrible truths. But their stories matter because they illuminate something important about guilt, identity, and the long shadow of evil. Evil leaves marks on everyone it touches, not just victims, but perpetrators' families too. Different marks, incomparable in severity, but real nonetheless. Loyalty and morality sometimes conflict irreparably. You can love a parent who committed atrocities. That love doesn't erase their crimes, and those crimes don't invalidate your love. Living with that contradiction is excruciating. Denial protects, but imprisons. Those who denied their parents' crimes avoided painful truths, but lived their entire lives in unreality, defending indefensible positions, wasting decades on impossible rehabilitation efforts. Truth, however painful, offers freedom. Those who confronted their parents' crimes paid a psychological cost, but gained the freedom of living in reality, of directing their lives toward meaning rather than defending the past. History doesn't end with the perpetrators. The crimes committed 80 years ago still shape lives today. The great-grandchildren of Nazi leaders carry DNA, names, and legacies they never chose. They remind us that genocide echoes across generations. The lost generation, the children of Nazi leaders, are now mostly gone. Hermann Göring died in 2018, Rudolf Himmler in 2018, Rudolf Hess in 2001, Nicholas Frank is in his 80s. The last of them are fading, but their stories endure as case studies in the psychology of inherited evil, the limits of filial loyalty, and the question every human must answer. When faced with terrible truths about those we love, do we deny reality or confront it? The children of Nazi leaders made different choices. History judges some more harshly than others, but all were trapped in a tragedy not of their making, carrying burdens that should never have existed, paying prices for crimes they didn't commit. If this exploration of a rarely discussed aspect of Nazi legacy moved you, subscribe for more thoughtful documentaries about history's moral complexities. Share your thoughts. What responsibility, if any, do descendants bear? And how do we balance understanding for children born into evil with accountability for their choices as adults? Thank you for watching this difficult but important story.